Trump says he will save American jobs.
There's a big label on these backhoes that says proudly built in the USA. But the truth is, the biggest companies that make farm equipment and construction equipment like this,
Hats off to the future.
they've been moving their jobs overseas.
Deere made the determination that, yeah, let's go ahead and pull the trigger on moving some stuff down to Mexico.
I'm actually surprised that this is barely happening, considering that a lot of car manufacturers have clearly left the US a long time ago. Not to mention technology and basically everything.
In the last year, the biggest makers of farm and construction equipment have laid off thousands of workers across the Midwest.
The company wants us to live in that constant state of fear.
We set out to uncover how these iconic American companies are abandoning the workers that built them.
Not only did they have the gun to our head, they had it cocked as well.
The tactics corporations use to undercut their commitments to good jobs,
They had the perfect divide and conquer strategy.
It's a very powerless position right now.
and why American jobs keep disappearing despite politicians' promises to save them.
Not only will we stop our businesses from leaving for foreign lands, but under my leadership, we are going to take other countries' jobs.
I think the
You know, to be fair, what he said isn't entirely wrong. I mean, sure, we haven't really seen much progress, but considering that Biden didn't repeal Trump's tariffs, I can safely assume that with time, maybe the next, I don't know, 5, 10 years, we might finally see factories in the US again.
million-dollar question is just that. How do we keep the work in the U.S.? What's it look like? How do we do it?
For an average person out of high school, to get hired on John Deere is a pretty big deal.
Chris Larson worked at John Deere for 22 years.
John Deere has been, the premier employer here in Ottumwa and many of the small communities throughout Iowa. And
Isn't Iowa, um, doesn't Iowa have a lot of fertile land and as such is very agriculturally focused?
Illinois for many, many years. But recently, they've moved the cutting department to Monterrey, Mexico.
In 2024, Deere cut its workforce in Ottumwa by about a third. Some people were laid off, and others, like Chris, were offered voluntary retirement. In 2023, Deere made $10 billion in profit and spent about $8 billion on stock buybacks and dividends.
Damn. My question is, I wonder how big the Deere Corporation actually is. I mean, just to put in perspective, what the margins are looking like. But yeah,
Deere's in business to make money for their shareholders. Moving to somewhere like Mexico is attractive for them, so you have a cheaper workforce.
Chris says that Deere has used the threat of offshoring to demand concessions from its workers for decades. It really got started in the 90s after NAFTA.
of course, it's NAFTA. To be fair though, I'm not. I don't think. I think NAFTA is a very has been a very crucial part of this whole thing that's been going on, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they're the biggest problem at the moment. As a matter of fact, I would argue that China has had a bigger impact than NAFTA because NAFTA only includes two nations, right? It's Canada and Mexico. And as far as I can tell, China has a significantly larger workforce than Mexico, and Canada's economy is nowhere near as big to make a dent into the US's.
In a few moments, I will sign the North American Free Trade Act into law. This pact will create a free trade zone stretching from the Arctic to the tropics, the largest in the world, a $6.5 billion market with 370 million people.
NAFTA gradually eliminated tariffs and trade barriers on products passing between the US, Canada, and Mexico. It was a green light for companies to move their factories wherever labor was cheapest.
NAFTA was a collaboration of both the Democratic and Republican parties. They both
Theoretically speaking, NAFTA should have slowed down migration. Now, it clearly hasn't, which is I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Sold us out.
I remember being on the Union Hall floor here in the 90s. I saw it all coming. It began with NAFTA.
Mike Edwards was working an hour's drive away at Deere's competitor, Case New Holland.
I was county chair of the Democratic Party for 8 years. I got to meet a lot of politicians, and I remember in 2004 talking to John Kerry, and I was hammering Senator Kerry about trade laws and the unfair landscape that unions, well, I can't talk about that, I can't do that, and besides, who else are they going to vote for?
Since NAFTA, union membership in Iowa and surrounding states has been cut nearly in half.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's terrible. No wonder wages are going down.
And even many union workers now start out on a lower pay scale than before.
In 1997, Deere threatened to move a couple facilities to Mexico if they didn't do this two-tier system.
Deere pushed its workforce onto a two-tier system, which meant lower pay for new hires. It effectively zeroed out years of wage and benefit gains for future employees. A few years later, Case followed Deere's lead in demanding a tiered contract.
The best way to explain it to you is you and me are working on a job.
This is the same thing as robotics, as with like the automation of various industries. You can't win. Sure, people have to unite and do something about it, but there's always going to be a limit. In this sort of situation, I mean, clearly the company had an upper hand. So what else is there? But the government has to intervene, right?
I've been there, say I'm a senior day worker. I'm making $10 more an hour doing the same job that you're doing right next to me, right? It creates issues in the workplace.
Nick Guernsey is president of the union at Case New Holland's Iowa plant. He explains the tier system created A workers, B workers, and C workers, the lowest paid.
An A worker has not got a pay raise in over 17 years. And the company is really proud of that. We had members that would work 40 plus hours a week in that plant still qualify for state aid food assistance because they didn't make enough money.
I mean, I understand. Let me put it this way. They always talk about the national average, I think, for income, but that number is so misleading. That number doesn't represent, it doesn't take into account massive amounts of wealth that could distort the image. Medium income in the US shows a very, very bleak thing. To put it simply, the average the average, I think, yeah, let's just go national. The average national wage is what, like 60,000, 70,000 maybe? The median national wage is closer to 30. So
That's pretty sad when you're a $1 billion corporation, right?
In 2021, John Deere workers across the Midwest went on strike. 7 months later, Case workers in Iowa and Wisconsin struck too.
So the strike happened because we were trying to close some of the gap issues.
After more than 260 days on the picket line, they reached an agreement on a new contract that included wage increases and upgrades for lower tier workers. But then, about a year later, Case announced it was laying off over 200 of the workers who had fought for that contract.
that's what I'm saying. You can't win unless there is legislation that protects you. This this should have fallen within bounds of um, worker protection, because the company literally just backstabbed the people who asked for more rights or more better pay or better working conditions.
And shifting their work to Mexico.
We made great gains, But at the end of the day, when you punch a bully in the mouth, sometimes the bully brings friends, right?
The pattern was the same at John Deere.
Thursday afternoon, workers in the Ottumwa John Deere plant received news that the company is moving mower conditioner production from the Ottumwa plant to a facility located in Monterrey, Mexico. The news has left workers in shock.
A lot of people speculate that these layoffs that we're facing now might be in retaliation for some of the gains that we made in these contracts.
The layoffs came in the last months of the 2024 campaign. On the road, Donald Trump started talking about them.
I'm just notifying John Deere right now. If you do that, we're putting a 200% tariff on everything that you want to sell into the United States.
Just two.
My question is, well, I know there's a bunch of tariffs that Trump wants to put, but will these tariffs specifically target nations outside of North America, or are these tariffs going to basically target everything? Because sure, John Deere can produce some stuff in China, produce other stuff in Japan or Germany, and then produce like the main bunch in Mexico. But out of all of those regions of the world, which ones are going to be the affected ones? What is that 200% tariff gonna target? All of them?
2 days after Trump's victory, case workers in Iowa were called into a meeting.
It was supposed to be just a regular meeting. As we walk into the room, we see individuals that don't normally go to our agenda meetings.
Tracy Chu has worked at Case for 12 years. Her husband, daughter, and son-in-law worked there too.
We knew something was going down.
They gave us this third grade slideshow on what their plan was.
Case announced tentative plans to close its Iowa plant, eliminating over 300 jobs. The products built there would be moved to Italy and to a non-union plant in Kansas.
From a family view, from a community view, just absolute devastation, just a smack in the face. It's just not feasible to build a backhoe in Burlington, Iowa anymore.
Why not?
Because it costs too much.
Case showed its workers a presentation compared.
So this is plant utilization in Burlington is 31%, and cost per hour is $264 an hour, versus what the heck is lease? I think it's definitely in the Balkans, but I don't know where. 60% and $134 an hour. So, and then of course you have India with Pithampur at 75% and $31 an hour, which is like way less. I mean, that's what you get with globalism, right? Of course, the consumers themselves are going to benefit because, I mean, I would assume that the prices wouldn't rise up as quickly. They would have more, the company would secure their production lines against inflation. I guess that's what they're trying to do. But yeah, I take back what I was saying. This is just messed up.
Its operating costs in different countries, saying that big wage and benefit cuts would be necessary to keep the plant in Iowa.
The total annual labor savings in Burlington would need to be over $33 per hour. So here's what they're saying is we need $33 an hour off the price of this.
And that's the fundamental problem. Companies like Case can pay workers in other countries nearly 10 times less to do the same job.
But will they do the job to the same quality?
To help offset this disparity, Congress passed an update to NAFTA, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or the USMCA.
Today, we're finally ending the NAFTA nightmare and signing into law the brand new U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Very special.
The USMCA gave the U.S. the power to penalize union-busting companies in Mexico and even bar their products from the U.S.
That's amazing, but at the same time, how does this work?
The hope was that the threat of penalization would make room for worker organizing in Mexico and start to bring Mexican wages more in line with American wages, reducing the corporate incentive to offshore.
Si pudiera hablar con los compañeros de John Deere.
Okay, hold on.
Si pudiera hablar con los compañeros de John Deere, de Caterpillar, el mensaje que les daría a ellos es que aquí en México tienen unos compañeros que están igual que ellos, luchando por mejores salarios.
Victor Manuel Vergara Garcia works for a Mexican subsidiary of Caterpillar, repairing their computers that run Caterpillar's heavy machinery. Like Deere and Case New Holland, Caterpillar increasingly builds its products south of the border, in the last 8 years nearly doubling its Latin American workforce.
This should theoretically raise the wages in that region of the world. At least if all of the companies are not colluding to maintain low wages, the wages should rise significantly and therefore become less competitive as time passes. But that's only if they're not colluding.
Victor makes about $3 an hour. In 2023, he led an effort to organize an independent democratic union at his plant.
Lo que estamos solicitando es un aumento justo a los salarios, respeto a nuestra libertad sindical, trato digno como trabajadores.
A week after Victor's union won its first vote, the company fired him. That's when the Biden administration decided to use the USMCA. It filed a case against the company.
Damn, they actually did something useful for once.
And under pressure, Caterpillar's subsidiary offered to reinstate Victor. It was one of about 30 times that the Biden administration used the USMCA.
30 times? What? How did I not? Why did nobody talk about this?
To crack down on corporate labor abuses and help workers organize.
Lo que esperábamos era que con las sanciones la empresa se sentara con los trabajadores a negociar el contrato colectivo de buena fe.
But when Victor went on to lead workers on a strike, he found that the company had put him and other strikers on a region-wide employer blacklist.
There you go. There you go. That's the reason why wages are not going up. They are colluding, after all. Oh boy. That's just so scummy. They're basically they're working together,
making it impossible to get other work. It's a classic strike-breaking tactic, illegal in the US and many other countries.
And why is it not illegal in Mexico?
Tenemos testimonios de trabajadores que comentaron que fueron a varias maquiladoras y que todas les decían lo mismo, que no los podían contratar porque venían de un lugar donde había un conflicto.
A coalition of American and Mexican unions asked the Biden administration to sanction the company under the USMCA for blacklisting strikers. But this time, the administration did not take action.
Bruh, they had a perfect opportunity to do something about this. Possibly even force the Mexican government to take action in their place. And they chickened out.
At the end of the day, the community of Burlington, Iowa, the surrounding communities need follow-through. My members at the plant that are currently working right now, we need the follow-through from our elected officials.
Victor and his colleagues have now been on strike for over a year and a half.
Resenting those workers isn't going to change a damn thing. It's just like a sea worker, you know, in a plant here. They're going after the low wages. We need to be down there helping them.
As Donald Trump enters the White House again, a consensus seems to be building that the U.S. needs a bolder trade policy to protect good-paying jobs. But what that means in practice is very much up for grabs.
What we need is President Trump to step in and say, no more jobs are leaving. We need you to step up and do what you promised.
Trump has promised tariffs on companies like Deere that offshore jobs.
We're putting a 200% tariff on everything that you want to sell into the United States, so that if I win, John Deere is going to be paying a 200%.
Clearly, someone wasn't supporting Trump during his election. I mean,
Not a big fan of Donald Trump, but yeah, kudos.
Tariffs make it more expensive to offshore, so they could give workers more leverage, not only to keep their jobs, but to make them better. But the other side of keeping good jobs in the US is investing in them. If tariffs are not combined with government support for high-wage industries, they can only help workers so much. And Trump has promised to end the Biden administration's investments in new American manufacturing jobs. So far, Trump's tariff threat has not dissuaded John Deere. It's continuing to move jobs from Iowa to a new factory it's building in Mexico, scheduled to be up and running in 2026.
I guess they're really confident. I wonder why. Maybe it has to do with what I was wondering earlier. Will the US actually sanction Mexico? Or, to be more specific, put tariffs on Mexico? Or will they put tariffs on products entering Mexico from other countries? I'm thinking there's more to this.
How the Trump administration will respond remains to be seen.
Let's start new. Let's build in protections for United States workers. Whether they're union or not, we got to have protections in our trade laws. They need to put the worker first.
How about we absorb Mexico and Canada and Greenland into the United States? If we do that, then problem solved. Now companies will need to pay Mexican employees, Canadians, the same as Americans, and without any benefit of choosing one over the other, then jobs should stop fleeing, right? I think that makes sense.